And now,
it's 10 a.m.
Let's just get down to it.
And it's time for your sports fix.
Strap yourselves in, folks.
From two guys who have covered the teams you're passionate about for years.
We are professionals.
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone. A very happy Tuesday to everybody out there. Kalani Watch Day 2 underway. And let's not waste any time. Let's go out to our air link, which means you can also see him on YouTube, our YouTube channel, or you can find him on Twitter at Mitch_Harper. It is our BYU Insider, Mitch Harper. What's going on, Mitch?
Busy times, Ben. It's always exciting, with Big 12 football championship game and this and signing day. Busy week.
It's 10:06 right now. Where is BYU with Kalani Sitake? Do you feel like we have updates up to the minute on what's going on? Have things changed this morning?
Nothing's changed too much. I think the biggest thing is that BYU is 100% committed to try to get Kalani Sitake retained. This is not some thought of let Kalani walk to bring in Jay Hill to be the head coach. They want to retain Kalani Sitake and keep him because they feel like Kalani Sitake is the perfect man for BYU.
So along those lines, and I know there are rumors that BYU is willing to increase pay, coaches pool, NIL, facilities, all these different things, which is essentially what Penn State has been offering. Do you know if it's the goal would be to 100% match what Penn State threw out there, because the rumor was $10 million a year at least? I mean, do you know what level BYU is willing to go to match what the offer would be?
Position BYU to be in a place where they can be, one of the top programs in the Big 12 in resources and be an annual contender. I think, when Kalani Sitake, it's not solely a specific dollar amount that he needs. Anytime that he's pursued this sort of thing, 2021, when BYU got invited to the Big 12, he looked for a contract extension because he was getting interest from Oregon and Washington, but he ultimately wanted to be at BYU. I mean, through all this, Kalani has been underappreciated at BYU at times. He's nowhere near the highest paid coach in the Big 12. Get him to a level where that says, one, he's taken care of, his staff's taken care of, and this program is in fact the winningest in the Big 12 in the 16-team era. Start acting like it. And I think BYU sometimes gets a little reactionary in moments, but BYU's committed to make BYU one of the tops in the Big 12.
So along those lines, do expectations have to change with Kalani if they do retain him and the cost goes up and the resources go up and the investment goes up? Does it change what the belief is and what he has to accomplish, or is what he's done over the last 2 years kind of the bar he just has to continue to meet?
Of course, he's got to continue to level it up, and because Kalani wants to get to a national title. That's the whole purpose of it all. Where sometimes people get upset about these college football playoff committees and how they view BYU. I think sometimes fans view BYU the same way and think there's a ceiling. Kalani's looking to break that ceiling. He's done it throughout his time at BYU in the 10 years he's been the head coach. No one thought they could win big road games against ranked teams. He's done that. No one thought they could unseat Utah as the top football program in the state. He's done that. Kalani has reinvented with the brand of what BYU football is. The Big 12's helped that, but Kalani has matched that, and he's leveled the program up. He can continue to break through the ceilings and get BYU to heights. This is all in an effort to get BYU in a position to where they can become a national title contender, not just a Big 12 champion, be one of the premier brands in the Big 12, but become a program that can go chase national titles. That's the big picture to all this. That's what Kalani wants to accomplish at his alma mater. BYU sometimes a little reactionary, not always forward thinking, because you could have saw the dominoes coming potentially. With all these coaching carousel openings back in September and October, there's always a ripple effect that could tie back to Kalani Sitake. And, the cliche narrative from national media when they say, oh, it's not a fit for Kalani Sitake at State College or Penn State. No, he'd be a fantastic fit because he can connect with anyone regardless of their social, economic backgrounds. I mean, I've seen every step of the way of Kalani Sitake's career at BYU from the moment he had his press conference nearly 10 years ago this month in the BYU broadcasting building to now. The type of players that he's had were guys that I've never thought in my wildest dreams BYU could get in there because of their backgrounds and things like that. It's because of Kalani in many respects, because of the culture that he's built. That can translate in this retention era of college football to any program. And the resources that Penn State could provide him, he could absolutely win big there. Now, would he win to the level that they expect by always getting national championships and Big Ten titles like the Ohio States of the world and now Indiana's? I don't know about that, but he would always be in the mix. And so I think that, Kalani, but to his soul, BYU football lives in him. And it's not unauthentic. It's not just a front, an entertainment ploy. BYU football is Kalani Sitake. And that's why he's the perfect man for this BYU program. And they've got to keep him at all cost. So
why was he listening to Penn State?
Because, again, sometimes he's been underappreciated. You look at the long-term extension last year, BYU didn't disclose for the first time ever an extension of what the length of that terms were. And, that was something that was kind of a little bit strange, where, again, it was never viewed as a extension that put him in the upper tier of the Big 12 in terms of salary. Coach Prime, big, huge celebrity, I think a really good football coach too, but he steps into Boulder and instantly gets, $8.5-9 million. Why isn't Kalani getting that after a guy that's grinded and done a lot in his decade at BYU, where he first starts out, getting handcuffed with Ty Detmer as the OC in an effort to get this job and execute the vision that he had for the program? There's been some ups and downs. He's had to navigate independence, but in the Big 12 era, he's really taken this thing off to great heights. And so understand, hey, if you're not going to pay me and pay my staff to the level that I think is fit for a program that, again, is the winningest in this iteration of the Big 12, well, now I have to kind of listen to my options. And the thing is, Kalani Sitake is a massive college football fan, and he would connect with that Penn State fan base, and he sees the brand of that. I mean, it's all strategic too. I mean, this guy doesn't just do things uncalculated. He would talk to places that would be an actual potential fit. And with a crazed fan base like Penn State, I think he would totally work there. They'd probably hate it at first, but then they hear the guy and they'd probably love him. So I think you got to listen all the time. Sometimes you get underappreciated in these jobs. It happens, even in our line of work sometimes. It's like you got to listen to these opportunities. And I think Kalani was rightfully so to listen to this out. And I think it can work out in the end for BYU. But I think this is also the moment, too, where it lets the fan base know that at times I think they've underappreciated Kalani, too. Not everyone, but I think pockets of the fan base have thought, oh, Jay Hill could be instantly better. And I think Jay Hill would be a fantastic coach. I remember 10 years ago, you and I were on a show back in another life. And I remember saying the top two candidates, not Ken Niumatalolo, it was Kalani Sitake and Jay Hill. Mm-hmm. Now these two together, it's an incredible tandem. And Jay Hill would be a fantastic head coach at BYU, really anywhere. But Kalani is the perfect guy because he just embodies everything that the program has to offer. And I think there's a lot more for him in his coaching career. But I think this also is that point that says, kind of in the same breath as Kevin Young, like, oh, we got a head coach that turned down Penn State. Kevin Young had maybe NBA opportunities that he could have pursued. That's been a big thing. Like, hey, we got a head coach, BYU does, in that turned down the NBA to be at BYU. Now that moment's there for Kalani where, the Oregon talk that was there, but it's kind of a little bit of gray areas. Like, did they offer, did they fully give him everything like Penn State's, making him a top priority? This would be a big win for BYU to say, hey, we got a coach that was wanted by a Big Ten blue blood, and he stayed at BYU. This is your guy of the future to take BYU to even greater heights than what they've been in the first 3 years in the Big 12.
What do you think the expectation is for Kalani if he continues to win at this level at BYU? He gets paid, he gets this commitment this year, and next season USC comes calling, or Washington comes, or at some point Dan Lanning leaves and Oregon comes. Like, do you think BYU is going to be comfortable if this happens over and over, or do you think Kalani is going to be more selective with that with the teams he's willing to talk to?
Well, I just think those programs, I mean, West Coast football, why can't BYU be better than those programs? Washington, it's a good program, but I mean, they've been really good this year at home, and like no one talks about them. They're just kind of forgotten in the Big Ten. Same to some extent with USC. I think BYU can be one of the great programs out West. I think they can. They got that ability. They've got the fan base. They've got the support to do that, where consistently BYU fans always show up. And that's one of the rare things out West anymore. I think this whole state does that with college football, where no matter what, these programs, these fan bases show up for college football. And that's a huge thing, especially in the NIL era and rev share. You're going to have inspired fan base. I mean, the reaction from people just on social media to this sort of move, like BYU fans it says a lot when a coach potentially leaves, and then, just the support that comes out. And again, I think sometimes there's been pockets of the fan base that have underappreciated him, but I think, Kalani, to me, this would be a move where, okay, this you're locked in. Enough of the, extensions, now it's all in place to go forward. And hopefully this would be the move that says you're going to be that guy that you aspired to be when you first took this job, the Polynesian Lavelle Edwards. That would be the thought here with this type of move.
Do you think he's going to coach for 10 years? I mean, how long do you think Kalani wants to do this?
It's a good question. I mean, he's already 10 years in. I mean, I've kind of wondered this myself. I think anything beyond another 7 would be pretty, I don't say surprising, but that would be compared to what you see in today's landscape with coaches, that would be pretty shocking. I think if you can get another 5 to 7 years after this one, that'd be huge. And then that kind of coincides with this media rights of the Big 12 era and, whatever happens next in whatever, college football takes in the next form of the sport after the 2030s. But I'd say another 7 years at least.
I would imagine the quicker this gets wrapped up, either direction, the better for BYU. I mean, I guess unless he's leaving for Penn State, that would not be ideal for the conference title game. But you'd have to expect BYU wants this to be done today whenever to keep him, but today at the latest, so you can start focusing on the biggest game in 30 years for BYU coming up on Saturday?
No question. And signing day tomorrow too. I mean, you got a top 25 recruiting class that needs assurances that you're their head coach, and they don't want to just sign officially and not know who the head coach is going to be. So this is critical, I think, for both programs to say, who are you going to sign with? It's time to move forward and get this thing done. So as soon as possible would be ideal here.
What do you think Penn State thought they were getting, not just Kalani as the head coach? Do you think they expected coordinators, players, that type of movement if they were bringing Kalani in?
Definitely. I mean, because when you're looking at this sort of operation at BYU, it's not just Kalani, it's the whole product of what he's producing. And you'd probably want him, and I'm sure Kalani being a man who loves his staff and the people that he works with. I mean, this was the dream staff that Kalani envisioned when he took the job 10 years ago. And it was a slow build to get here, but it then happened, and it's got a lot of head coaching experience. So yeah, I'd expect a lot of it to be the staff going with him too. Who that would be, that would be a big question, but I'm sure Jay Hill would be a big piece of that too. And that's where it would get interesting if Kalani left. Is it just a slam dunk to assume Jay Hill would be the head coach at BYU? I'd like to think that would be a better gig than being a defensive coordinator, but still, it's hard to argue. So, I mean, I think that would be it seems like, Penn State, with their resources and their commitment to their football program, they do whatever it takes. If they felt confident in a candidate, they would go the full distance to get whatever he needs to succeed.
How should BYU be feeling about going into this game against Texas Tech on Saturday?
It's a tall task, and Texas Tech, whether there was the coaching distraction or not, and I believe it completely is. I know Kalani said it's a good thing, and I don't know if I can really get on board with that, because whenever there's uneasiness and uncertainty in college football programs, other teams are going to pounce and then start contacting agents and try to put out feelers of, hey, this could be out there in the portal if your coach leaves. And that creates uneasiness, and that takes away from just any sort of the normal routine and what happens in the workflow of a given week. So it's definitely a distraction, but I think Texas Tech is a huge challenge, even if BYU didn't have this distraction. And it's going to take a massive effort by BYU to get this done, because I think, I've been covering BYU since 2014 on the beat, and this is the best defense I've seen BYU go up against. There's been some good ones, even before 2014, 2009 Oklahoma, some of the Utah defenses. I think Texas Tech's the best defensive front BYU's faced in the last, 10, 11 years. And they are for real. And I think when Kalani Sitake says they are the best team in college football, I think they're right there. I think at a minimum, they are the third best team in the sport. So this is going to be a massive effort by BYU to get this done. I think that they've got to be able to have the quick passing attack working for them in this game. They can't just solely rely on LJ Martin to get this done. I mean, LJ's got to be huge. He's got to at least get 100, but they've got to be able to have a quick passing attack that can also almost act as a rushing attack too, to maybe pick up some, 3-4 yards to get you in 2nd and 6, because they had never had any 2nd and manageables. It always felt like it was 2nd and 10, 2nd and 9, and they were always behind the sticks. Just be in a manageable situation and try to get some methodical drives to eat up some time. And they got to get some chunk yardage too. I think that having a big play, pop off like they had last week where, Parker Kingston goes off for a 55-yard punt return instead of a muff punt, things like that where the complementary football comes into play. BYU's got to show that and then some against this Texas Tech team, who again, I think is like Kalani, I think is one of the best teams in the sport this year.
I've not hid my disdain for the college football playoff, not just because of, the ranking system and who's in and who's out and what it's actually designed to do, but because I think it does diminish great seasons if you don't make the college football playoff. And I think BYU has had a great season. If they don't make the college football playoff, how will this season be remembered and compared to other good seasons in BYU history?
It's a good question. I think that it would be viewed as a season where it wouldn't, I don't know if it would be viewed as in high regard as maybe last year. It's tough because I think it's one of the best teams in BYU football history, just like last year. I think it's better than last year's team, this group. But I just think now that you're at the championship game, and if you get left out, I think people will always just remember the fact that the committee hosed them. It would join the ranks of 1996 where, and over time, of course, 1996 is viewed as one of the great teams in BYU history, but they got turned down for the Bowl Alliance. It was Texas, 9-3 Texas, that got picked instead of 13-1 BYU to go to the Fiesta Bowl. I mean, this is just the same song and dance every form of the postseason of college football. This happens to BYU. It's shocking. And that's why I don't understand why people outside the SEC Big Ten echo chamber do not want a 24-team playoff that has 4 automatic bids to every Power 4 league, because then you get the chance to truly determine how the strength of a conference is, because it gets played on the field. You have equal bids, automatic qualifiers for everyone, and then it's settled on the field. You want to say the SEC is the best league? Okay, settle it on the field and have these 4 Big 12, 4 SEC, 4 Big 10, 4 ACC, and 2 Group of 6. Play it all out, and then it all gets determined out there, because I think that would be the best thing, because I don't think many teams would want to face, BYU or Utah in a bracket. That would be a tough out, especially if they're at home. So that's what I want to see eventually with the sport, because if you can minimize the playoff committee, that's better. I mean, I asked directly, why is BYU to the playoff committee chairman? I asked him point blank, why is BYU behind 2 lost teams? And then he just laid out all these wins over ranked teams, which happened in September before their playoff rankings occurred. So they're obviously getting influenced by media pollsters, and those same media pollsters are the people that are saying, well, my process, I don't really, it's not that big of a deal. No, it is a huge deal. And it has these perceptions, and BYU has been the most underrated team and kind of disrespected team in the playoff era when it comes to rankings. So this is just the same song and dance. You'd have to think that BYU, circling back to this season, if they could win a bowl game, then it would be viewed as kind of a high note. But I think this year would be different from the postseason side of things, because there would not be as much motivation because of the letdown. Because last year you could kind of get up for Coach Prime, the Buffs. You didn't play in the Big 12 championship. This is the de facto people's Big 12 champ. You wouldn't have that this go around if you played USC in the Alamo Bowl, or you played an ACC team in the Pop-Tart Bowl. Maybe if you played Miami, maybe. But I just think that would not be as inspiring as, say, last year's situation.
Find him on Twitter at Mitch_Harper. Read all of his coverage at KSLSports.com, including the latest on Kalani Sitake, up to the minute, and whether he's going or whether he's staying. Mitch, really great stuff. Thanks for jumping on.
You bet. Take care.
There he is, Mitch Harper, our BYU Insider at KSLSports.com. Again, make sure and go read him. Follow him on Twitter to keep the latest. And you know what? Thing I don't talk about a lot. Subscribe to our push notifications, our text line, if you want to make sure you do get the latest stories as they break. Mitch is as good as anybody and better at getting them up online quickly and then getting them sent directly to your phone so you know the news as soon as it happens. You can do it all at KSLSports.com. All right, when we come back, top 3 stories at KSLSports.com. Stick around, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
It's time to break down the biggest stories of the day. This is the top 3 stories of the day on KSLSports.com. 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jacob Band, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Time for the top 3 stories at KSLSports.com. It's all sponsored by Jay Brooks. Jay Brooks, cherish your loved ones with Jay Brooks Jewelers. Explore their expertly crafted engagement rings made from the finest materials. Christmas is 3 weeks from Thursday. Man, go check out Jay Brooks Jewelers. You're looking for excellent options, whether it's an engagement ring, jewelry. They have it. Jay Brooks Jewelers, 2 locations up and down the Wasatch Front. Christian, where are we starting today?
Number 1, the big story, of course, Kalani Watch, Ben, rolling into day 2. How long do you think this is going to go?
I think ideally it would be wrapped up yesterday. If not yesterday, we might as well do it today. I am curious. This feels so much like, with the irony of tomorrow being National Letter of Intent Day, it does feel like these last recruiting battles where you're hoping to get the final visit, and whoever ends up with the final visit feels confident that they're going to be able to ink that person because they can continue to up the bar. You know, they want to have the ball last in overtime so they know exactly how many points they have to score to win. I think that's what you're hoping for. And look, with where BYU is as a football team getting ready for Saturday, I don't think Kalani can be leaving town at this point. You know, he can't be disappearing to go be courted by Penn State for 24 hours, obviously. So whatever other final offer Penn State's going to be able to come back with probably is going to happen over the phone, over Zoom calls. And that doesn't mean they laid out all their cards right away. I'm sure they made an extraordinarily compelling offer. They would have had to pique his interest in the first place beyond it just being Penn State. They had to have a offer that wasn't just competitive, but was truly something that they didn't think BYU would be able to match. And once BYU threw down the gauntlet and said, hey, we're at least going to get this as close as possible or give you the tools to compete at the level we think you need to at BYU with the resources we can offer, it does seem like the winds have swayed back towards BYU's favor, or at least they're in the running once again, which I will tell you honestly, 24 hours ago at this point, I really felt like things were leaning heavily towards Kalani going. We played the press conference between Joey McGuire and Brett Yormark and Kalani yesterday, and Kalani did not address the issue directly. He said, it's a good thing. I'm with Mitch Harper. I don't understand how that would have been a good thing at all that he's getting this type of interest. It does mean BYU's playing well, but this type of distraction is not necessarily a positive for the Cougars. But if that decision hasn't been made yet, I do think that probably means that BYU has at least made this competitive. And if it's competitive, does Kalani just lean with where he's comfortable, with what he knows, with what his love is for BYU and decide to stay?
It's kind of a double-edged sword because the longer this drags out, I feel like is better for BYU in the sense of keeping Kalani Sitake. But at the same time,
why?
Because I think that is going to give them more time. As we heard yesterday, like even going throughout our show, it felt like Kalani was going to leave. And then by the end of the night, it felt like Kalani had met with, and it's all rumored, but met with members and boosters. And it seemed like BYU got all the financial resources together. So I think more time gives them, I guess, more time to do that, right? But at the same time, it's a distraction when you have this bowl game coming up.
I think if he's going to stay at BYU, he needs to put a pin in it today. In all honesty, I think
ideally, yeah.
If this is the plan and he's going to be here and BYU has lined up what their best offer is, because what's BYU not putting on the plate at this point? Are you going to hold off and say, well, let's go in for a second final visit and try and offer something on Thursday just in case? Like I can't imagine that would be the ideal approach to maintaining him or keeping him here in Provo. I think you had to lay out everything you could. You had to, circle the wagons yesterday to put the best offer available and understand that it was going to be countered by Penn State still one more time. And maybe Penn State can't offer anymore. I think if this drags on beyond today, it starts to get worse for BYU. I think if he doesn't say, look, I'm here, we're competing for a conference championship on Saturday. If we win, we're going to the college football playoff. This is exactly where I want to be. I know what type of money you're offering me. I think if this drags on beyond today, I would think that he's still very seriously considering Penn State, and I don't want that. If I'm a BYU fan, I don't want that. And it's been extraordinarily impressive what's happened over the last 24 hours and their ability to get these huge donors from these major companies located in our state to step forward, make public pleas. Obviously, there's way more happening even behind the scenes, upping his money, seemingly at a moment's notice to make sure he can stick around. I do get the feeling, and I've done this before, and this is a bit of a flawed comparison because I think Kalani's an absolutely excellent head coach, but have you ever bid for something on eBay?
Yeah, I love eBay.
And you kind of get to that final 6 hours where it's counting down, and you're like, ooh, if you had told me I was going to pay this amount for this product in the first place, I probably never would have put that initial bid down on it. Maybe you start at $25 and by the end you're at $100 and you're thinking, oh man, I would have just bought this for $90, but I never would have spent $100 on this product. I do wonder if we're getting into this arms race between Penn State and BYU where they're upping themselves to a cost that I'm not sure to what end it brings. Is BYU putting Kalani actually into a spot now to compete for a championship that they weren't a week ago? And if they weren't a week ago, why not? And what changes dramatically? Like, why weren't, if they were all in on Kalani a week ago, did they need, or were they not? And did they need Penn State to come in and say that, like, we think he's good enough? And then BYU opens their eyes and says, like, oh, yeah, we do think he's good enough, actually. We didn't see it until somebody else placed a bid on the product. Now I realize how much I actually love it. Like, I'm not sure I understand that aspect of this conversation of why everybody is willing to continue to increase the price over and over and over if you weren't willing to do it a week ago.
I think that honestly ties into what Kalani was talking about when he said that this is a good thing because he is getting more and more national attention. And yes, that hurts BYU's pocketbooks, but that ultimately is a good thing for the program, for Kalani, and for his staff, right?
To get this type of commitment.
To get this type of commitment and this type of money that, frankly, they deserve. And it's been well known that BYU has not paid their coaches historically, right?
As well
as what they deserve. And now you have a team that's 11-1 and on the verge of the college football playoff, and a lot of people would argue that they should be in. And there are a lot of guesses out there as to what Kalani Sitake makes. Nobody knows for sure.
Yeah.
But if those numbers are true, he is severely underpaid.
Yeah.
And I think that he has every right to be one of, if not the highest paid coach in the Big 12.
He certainly deserves to be in that conversation. And if BYU wants to keep him from Penn State, he's going to have to be. And then my further question, we talked to Mitch about it in the last segment, is what happens next year when somebody comes calling? If BYU continues to win at the level that this expectation sets, which is 10 wins a year, 11 wins a year, he's recruiting kids from all over the country, he's getting big recruits to come to BYU and having success at a school that has, in the last 30 years, not had this level of success, it's not going to stop. And at what cost are these donors, the BYU fan base, willing to get to keep him around? Because if he's going to be the hot commodity every summer, and Penn State has already laid this out, are they going to keep being able to fend people off? Or is this going to be Kalani's last time to play this card and have to say, hey, all the donors came to your backing. They've given you everything you need to compete in the Big 12. BYU's not leaving the Big 12 anytime soon. You don't need an Ohio State-like budget or an Oregon State or an Oregon budget to compete in the Big 12. You just don't. You know, Texas Tech has a lot, but we can give you as much as Texas Tech. Now it's on you to win. Is that enough? Is that expectation enough? And then at some point, does that get tapped out because these other schools continue to come for him? We'll see. Kalani's going to have to keep winning on the field. As long as he wins on the field, that is good for BYU. All right, what's next?
Number 2, you talked about it yesterday. After a rough game on Sunday, the Jazz really bounced back last night against Houston.
Very impressive win for the Jazz, 133-125. After getting blown off the floor on Sunday, they just did not belong on the court with the Rockets. At least didn't look like it. And then last night they showed that they can compete with these types of teams. And I think this was the best win of the season for the Jazz. You know, they beat Phoenix early in the year before Phoenix had kind of figured itself out. They beat Boston on the road. And Boston's fine, but it's not a great team. This win, after what they showed on Sunday, I thought was really impressive. And you got it from your 2 stars. And your 2 stars had basically been entirely taken out of the game on Sunday. Markkanen was fine. He had 18 points Sunday afternoon. But it was pretty quiet. It was pretty unimpactful. And they were down 30 most of the game. Keontae George had his worst game as a pro on Sunday. 0 points, 8 turnovers. I think he had 2 assists in the game. Real carelessness at some points in the game. He had checked out mentally, which he had not done at any point this year, which I thought could have been a point in which he regressed for the rest of the year. And it was going to test kind of this new mental strength that he had developed in the offseason and had talked about, and the maturity that I've talked to people in the Jazz front office that they're raving about what a different person he is. And he showed it yesterday. He came out and he had 28 points and he took on the challenge, and he had another bad first quarter. And I thought, oof, is this going to bleed over? Is this going to be something that derails him? Because you've seen this happen with young players. You've seen this happen with young teams. Things go wrong, and once it goes wrong, they don't know how to stop it. And Keontae immediately put a stop to it. And I thought that's what was most impressive.
It's a very encouraging sign, obviously, because, I mean, you had been saying towards the latter part of the offseason with some of the conversations that you had, this Jazz front office was very excited about Keontae George, and that kind of caught you and, a lot of people on social media by surprise because of what we had seen over the first 2 years. It was like, really? That guy is impressing you with his maturity? Like, nobody ever would have thought that, and we are actually seeing it. And as you mentioned, the old Keontae George would have had that bad game and then just slid. Right?
And it would have kept going.
But he bounced back, and you got to give him a ton of credit for doing that. And it's really cool to see him take that big step in year 3, similar to what we've seen other players do.
And beyond it mattering for Keontae George personally, more importantly, if you're a Jazz fan, it matters for the Jazz. You have to have guys who can react to adversity. And he showed an ability to do it. Lowry continues to play at a higher level than he ever has. And look, Lowry hadn't been playing particularly well over his last 5 games. He'd gone from 30 points a game down to 20. He was shooting, I think, 23% from the three-point line. Like, that hot start had basically entirely disappeared. And my question for Lowry has always been, can you be more than a complimentary shooter? Can you do things on the court that help you win when your shots aren't going in? And over the previous 5, I didn't think he'd done a ton. And then last night, he only took 3-point attempts because his three-point shot hasn't been falling. And what do you have to do when that's the case? You have to get baskets the hard way. And he earned 11 trips to the free throw line. He made 9 of them. He did make 2 of his 3 3-point attempts. He got 8 rebounds. He did the other things that are not as fun and not as easy to do when you're his size to help the Jazz win the game, and he found a way to do it. Now, there are other issues at play here. Houston was on the second night of a back-to-back in Salt Lake City after they steamrolled the Jazz on Sunday, and they came into this game very haphazardly. And I thought Kevin Durant played an absurdly lazy game, despite the fact that he had the 30 points, because he's that good of a player that he can wake up and pour in 30, regardless of the difficulty. He's that good of a player, but he didn't really try that hard to win the game. And I thought that was a flaw. I do think Houston's overall a flawed roster. I think it's going to be exposed in the playoffs. But regardless, that was a good win from the Jazz's top players. And then their young players, Ace Bailey, Walt Clayton, and Kyle Filipowski also played really well. I just continue to be shocked at how good of a player Ace Bailey is from an all-around standpoint. There were flashes at Rutgers as a young player that he was going to be a big-time scorer. We knew he could rebound a little. You didn't see any passing. You saw some really poor defensive effort, especially when he was not on the ball. He really checked out and just kind of stood up and sometimes put his hands on his hips and just kind of looked around and just would get back cut and beat all the time by lesser players. You're just not seeing it. His buy-in to be a great NBA player is there. And as long as he is bought in, and he's shown, I don't think, a single second on the court over his first 19 games in the NBA, that are 20 games in the NBA, that he's not going to be fully bought in. With his talent level, if he continues to be this bought in, I mean, he's going to be the Jazz's best player in the next 24 months, and it's going to be by a lot.
That's coachability, man. That's what that is. That is being willing to listen to the people you need to listen to.
Yeah, understanding what's good for you is good for the team, and what's good for the team is good for you, and that was not obvious at Rutgers all the time. And you recognize it had more to do with the context of the players around him and the situation he had walked into than the person himself. So that's a really good sign. Walt Clayton also had his best game as a pro, the other first-round pick for the Jazz. 8 points, 6 rebounds, or 6 assists, 5 rebounds. Hit a couple of shots. He just looked engaged. He looked the most engaged he had, and in fact got most of the backup minutes at guard in the second half over Isaiah Collier. Isaiah played a little bit, but Walt Clayton still got those minutes, so I thought that was really impressive. From Walt Clayton, Jazz back in action on Thursday against the Brooklyn Nets on the road. That's a chance to get back-to-back wins, and 3 wins out of 4, and then they're in New York on Friday night against Jordan Clarkson and the Knicks. What's next?
Number 3, amidst all the chaos in Provo yesterday, sounds like there was a team meeting up on the hill. Our guy Steve Bartle reported that after the meeting, reports say it's business as usual.
Yeah, there were dueling team meetings set for BYU and Utah yesterday, and there was some thought that is Witt going to announce his retirement and Kalani's going to leave for Penn State, and that's why they were gathering. It does sound like that might have been the intention of the meeting at BYU, and we don't know if that was ever the case for Utah. And in fact, in all honesty, with National Letter of Intent Day coming tomorrow, Witt shouldn't leave before tomorrow. Witt shouldn't announce that it's his last game. And you know what? Witt should coach the bowl game. Well, he should see what happens in the college football playoff over the next week. But he should coach the bowl game and then announce what he wants to do, or announce shortly before the bowl game and allow Morgan Scalley to take over the same way he was allowed to take over going into the Fiesta Bowl and be the head coach there, the co-head coach, before taking over officially the next year. I would imagine that would be the same situation for Kyle Whittingham. I'd be surprised if he announced it dramatically before that. And honestly, he may want to see what happened with Kalani at BYU. I mean, he may just want to keep an eye on that. Not that I think that should radically change what his decision-making is going to be, but you might as well play it out a little bit, gather a little bit more information just to make sure you're making the right decision.
I have seen, we'll need to confirm this or not, but I have seen that Whittingham has a deadline actually, which is December 5th, which is Friday.
Okay.
So we may know, we should know by the bowl game on what's going to happen.
Should definitely know by the bowl game. Utah should absolutely be willing to kick that can down the road. If he needs another week to decide, he's earned that. If he needs another 2 weeks to decide, he's earned that. There's no reason to put this on Witt. Witt, if Witt sticks around next year, I should say, Utah's in a great spot. And if he doesn't, I think Utah's in a just fine spot. I think Morgan Scalley's more than prepared to be the head coach of this team and move on here. And I don't totally get the impression, and certainly there's always movement, but I don't totally get the impression that Utah's staff is going to get picked clean the longer they wait here in these first couple of weeks of the season. It is Tuesday. That means it's a Jazz Ticket Tuesday. Hit it, Christian.
It's Jazz Ticket Tuesday, and your chance to win tickets is right now.
Call this number now.
Call this number now.
Be caller number 12 at 801-575-ZONE. 801-575-ZONE. And you'll be on your way to Delta Center to see the Utah Jazz.
He fires the three. He hits. Oh, don't do me like that.
This is 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jazz Ticket Tuesday, caller 12 right now, 801-575-ZONE. That's 801-575-ZONE. Wins a pair of tickets to see the Jazz against the Oklahoma City Thunder coming up this Sunday, December 7th at Delta Center. 801-575-ZONE will be the 12th caller through. All right, we'll be back with more next coming up, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Let's go! Complete game coverage of the Cougars is right here on the KSL Sports Zone. It's a Big 12 title game showdown for Kalani Sitake and the Cougars as they square off against Texas Tech for a spot in the college football playoff. Exclusive Big 12 title game coverage on the Zone is presented by JCW's, the Burger Boys, quality and a lot of it. You're listening to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Today is Tuesday. Tomorrow is Wednesday, meaning tomorrow is Win Ticket Wednesday. And good news, Jake will be back tomorrow. Win big this Wednesday on the KSL Sports Zone with Win Tickets Wednesday. This week, it's win them before you can buy them tickets to Aerofest 2026, featuring Styx and Chicago at Utah First Credit Union Amphitheater coming up August 30th, right around the corner. Tickets on sale this Friday at 10 a.m. at livenation.com. Listen to the KSL Sports Zone all day on Wednesday for your chance to win, but very cool. Go see Styx and Chicago and have your August plans already made for you. I am a little surprised, and look, I want to back this up, or before I say this, I just want to lay out that I'm a huge Kalani Sitake fan. I love the way he coaches. I actually think I buy him more as a coach than I do as the perfect fit for BYU. I think Kalani would win anywhere. I think Kalani could win at Wisconsin. I think Kalani could win at Oregon State. I think Kalani could win at an SEC school. I think Kalani could win at the Big Ten. So I think in that sense, I'm not trying to undercut anything about Kalani. I am surprised that the feeling has come out that it's Kalani is not just the best guy for this job, he's the only guy for this job. That Kalani at all costs is going to be the case. Because if you were to tell me that 3 years from now Jay Hill was in a similar spot and had the same resources as Kalani, that BYU would be back to competing for Big 12 title games, I wouldn't be surprised in the least. We saw Jay Hill out-kicking his coverage consistently at Weber State. It's a hard place to win at Weber State. It's a cool job. We care about college football a lot in our state, but compared to some of the other schools in that conference, Montana State, winning Weber State's really difficult. And Jay Hill was able to do it. And I have no doubt he'd be able to win at BYU if he ended up as their head coach. And that could still be the case. So I am surprised at I want to say the desperation, but the commitment to Kalani being basically all out or bust in this situation. And that's not to undercut how good of a coach I think Kalani is. I think he's a great coach. I think Kalani will win a lot in his time wherever he is. I wonder if why they feel the resources that they put in there wouldn't bear similar results with a guy like Jay Hill versus Kalani.
You know what's so interesting about that? Who's pounding the table to bring Kalani back? Who's coming up with all the funds? It's the Crumble guy. It's the big money boosters.
Yeah.
It's the fans with the money. And that's what you're going to see, these people with a lot of dough to spend that fall in love with the coaches or with the players. It's because they're fans and they are connected to these people.
It's a really good point, and it's a real flaw. And I don't look. The fans aren't. I'm not saying the fans are stupid or wrong. I'm not saying that at all.
But
and
they
Kalani's
are emotionally
great.
attached to these people more so than the athletic department may be.
You're absolutely right, because it's a business at the end of the day for these athletic departments, and they have to balance the budget and the resources and the time and the commitment and what they can actually offer these schools. The fans are always going to want more, because a collection of 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 fans has more time and resources than the people making the decision in the athletic department for BYU. So you're right. They get this push, this groundswell of support for Kalani, that it's Kalani or bust. And I disagree. I just don't think BYU has to view themselves as Kalani or bust, the same way they didn't have to view themselves as Mark Pope or bust. They moved on from Mark Pope. They got Kevin Young. They're still really good. If Kevin Young were to move on, let's say he gets an NBA job, which could certainly happen, you go and get the next guy, you give him similar resources, and you hope he can come in and win. And that doesn't mean that coaches aren't stars and that coaches don't make a difference. They clearly do. But I do wonder if we're underrating BYU as a program to inflate this idea that it has to be Kalani at all costs, because I don't agree with that. And again, Kalani's going to win. Kalani would win at Penn State. Kalani would win at Washington. Kalani would win at Oregon. Kalani would win at USC. Kalani would win at Utah, wherever you want to put him. And those are West Coast schools. I mean East Coast schools as well. Kalani will win because Kalani is a winner. But I think BYU is a really good program and would win as well. All right, Cole Bagley is going to join us next. The Utah Mammoth are in an absolute free fall. What is going on, and do they actually have the ability to change it? We'll talk to him about it. Stick around. 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.